let's start with James Kirkham, a Chief Business Officer from Defected. In full disclosure, I met James a million years ago when he was running an agency called Holler. Hello, James. How are you doing?
I'm very well. Thanks for having me.
No, don't be silly. Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. As I briefly said at the start, it sounds really trite to say it, doesn't it? But Defected have had a really good lockdown. The brand and the organisation have behaved in a really good way. Before we go into what you've done, why do you think you've been able to respond in such a dynamic way?
It's a great question. I think we're fortunate in many ways because ultimately we are about dance culture, dance music, and it is by its very nature an uplifting beast. And I think we sort of set our stall out fairly early that the one role we could play in all of this is a beacon of positivity, is to be as celebratory and upbeat and uplifting as we possibly could be. What we did, I guess, which has sort of got most notoriety beyond the records and beyond the content on any given day, came out of our own adversity too. We couldn't, we're sat here in August now, we're meant to have right this week actually would be the Croatia Festival. Defected would be 5th year of a big kind of 5-day event in Croatia. We would be right in the heart of our Ibiza season. The point is a huge amount of events bringing people together was simply no longer on the agenda. So, yeah, it wasn't a means of displacing. It was just trying to find a way to harness and bring back perhaps some of the positivity and create a spirit of belonging when people couldn't get on the dance floors anymore. So that's where it all sort of started.
And take us back to the start of lockdown, if you like. How are those decisions made? Because you must have sat down at the start and thought, have we got the technology to do this? Are we equipped to do this? I mean, you've been staging huge events, if you like, in the physical world for a very long time. Are the skills transferable? Is it just pushing a different button? I mean, yeah, tell us about
that. Somewhere in between. But you'd probably be surprised to kind of witness both the creative process and the speed at which it kind of all got executed. I mean, we actually called it quite early. We left our office about 10 days in the end prior to, I guess, the rest of certainly the country, in the respect that we were testing it out, wanted to see if we could even work from home. And when we did establish in the first few days, we said, this is going to happen. We may as well stay like this. It was at the end, I think, of that first week, just prior to the proper lockdown, when we were all first kind of being a part of the social distancing and clubs were shut for the very first time. We just had a WhatsApp conversation with a bunch of us on a Sunday night and said, could we effectively throw an event in a virtual way next week? And it really was that quick that it started coming together. On the Monday morning, we put a post out saying we're going to put on a virtual festival. By the Monday afternoon, a whole bunch of talent from Shapeshifters to Sam Divine to Low Stepper, Simon Dunmore himself, a whole bunch of great artists, DJs, all put their hand up and said, I want to be involved. This was at the time as well where you could still physically go into a venue, albeit with huge amounts of social distancing. So we leveraged then the Ministry of Sound, who are kind of great friends and partners and stuff like that, and of course have their own kind of turmoil to deal with in this time. And we staged it there, and it was all about like wiping down the equipment. It was about elbow bumping. There were like 6 people in the entire venue for the entire duration of the piece, which was bizarre. And for these DJs who, let's be fair, have done this a lot to most unbelievable crowds in the world, most said they'd never been more nervous in their whole life because they knew they were going to such an audience of millions. And you know what? It kind of meant something. It was all very, very new, it felt at that point, and it felt quite significant. I mean, it was in terms of the numbers and the noise and the positivity around it, but there was definitely a moment that occurred. We never set out to do this for lockdown. We set out to do one, but we spend an awful lot of time with the comments from our community. We're very lucky. We've got a really big community, about 6.5 million people now, fans and followers on social around the world. And on that Friday night, everyone said, you have to do this every week. You have to be here for lockdown. So we did.
What sort of numbers were you getting, James? I mean, what was the peak and what week you got how many week? Yeah.
Overall, I think we did 9 weeks out of the 10. We did something like 19 million views in total, which was kind of insane. I think one of the weeks was probably about 3.5 million, something like that. It varied a little bit, sometimes according to talent. We had some amazing names who came on board. Calvin Harris played, Carl Cox, like ridiculous, brilliant. Also super diverse, people from all around the world. We had like Mambo Brothers from a balcony in Ibiza, or just a brilliant kind of global feel to it. We had like Roger Sanchez from Miami. I think it went to something like 133 different countries in the end. So it was very interesting as well, because the whole point about the positivity kind of hit us between the eyes. It was very, very humbling. People were sending in pictures and videos of them dancing in their living rooms, of course, cross-generational, kind of showing kids house music for the first time, or people in their hospital bed getting up and dancing and showing us the video. There were NHS workers in their ambulance on their bike with an iPad. So it was very humbling. But it was also, from a business perspective, interesting, because if we have a venue, we might be capped at 5,000 people, but here we're reaching 3.5 million. So it's a very different game. They're not paying for the privilege, but it's still useful for it as a business.
Completely. And one thing that struck me, actually, just as a viewer of some of these, which is one of the reasons that I wanted to have you on, was, I suppose, in a way, I'll be honest, I'm 42 years of age, clubbing slightly left me behind. But this, for me, was perfect, because my family were locked down. We were having parties in our kitchen, and it felt like almost a more rewarding experience than going clubbing. It almost transcended nightlife culture and became, lockdown culture.
I agree with that. I think there was a funny time. Feels like a long time ago now, doesn't it? It feels longer ago than it was at the early days. But the strangeness of the time, we noted very early on that audiences, all of us, actually yearned for routine. So I don't know if you've got kids, Joe Wicks's morning PE workout became, it's 10 a.m, it's time. Or there were these various sort of junctures. The Thursday night clap, weirdly, a Friday afternoon became a Defected moment. It was like 4 o'clock, here we go. Everyone probably cracked open a beer or poured themselves a gin and tonic or whatever, and the kind of weekend started. And a lot of the audience who came to us sort of said that. They said, it starts my weekend. That was that moment of release. And that's what it is. It's cathartic. It's a moment of release. It's a chance to perhaps unwind and most importantly, feel like you're with others. Watching those comments and videos and photos kind of pouring in. It's like, oh yeah, this is a collective experience. We're part of this together, which is kind of lovely.
And what do you think the music industry will learn from the things that you've been doing, and I suppose the other things that have been happening more broadly during lockdown that the music industry have been looking at?
I think there is this, honestly, I think there is an absolutely brilliant race right now, technologically driven, digitally, of course, creatively, where people like me, have big egos in the workplace and think, if I see something else that's fantastic, I think, God, I wish I'd done that. So Travis Scott in Fortnite was a really cool, interesting, exciting moment. Minecraft are putting on festivals, like in-game festivals is quite a unique, interesting place. The Tomorrowland Festival from a week or two ago, use of green screen looked amazing. Like, no one's quite got it perfect because everyone's trying the new. We've tried the new ourselves. We evolved the format. We switched it around so you could choose your room. We're doing a big commercial sort of version of one this weekend around sort of fusing music and football. But the point is, everyone's trying to keep pushing it on. And I think that's brilliant, full stop. It's brilliant for the consumer, but it's also great for the music industry. And I think in 2021, it's still going to be uncertain. I hate to say it, but I do believe it is. Don't think it's going to be very obviously, right, everyone's back, off we go. But I do think there'll be massive kind of connotations or echoes, if you like, from this. I think it's very natural that we could sit here this time next year buying tickets to an event and part of it is a virtual pass or part of it is behind the scenes delivered digitally. That's unbelievably natural now, whereas before that might have felt like novelty. And that's probably a good thing.
This may seem like a silly question. I should say, by the way, something I should have said at the start, do get your questions in on the questions tab. They are being filtered and they will come through to me. So yeah, do get them in. James, this might seem like a silly question. Can a virtual event, a digital event, ever be as good as a physical event? Or are they trying to achieve two different things?
I think we have to, maybe in the future. Right now, they are not the same. one can't displace the other. Like, it depends what you're after, of course. If you're I don't know, 18, 19, 20-year-old kind of fan of Honey Dijon, for example, you're in for a fantastic kind of club in Elephant and Castle, sweaty dance floor, techno-driven brilliance. You can't replicate that. What you can do, though, is use music to bring people together. Use house music to cut through, to kind of get rid of any kind of cultural divide, to get that feeling of it is for everyone at this time. So you can bring about, I guess, some of that dance floor philosophy, that spirit, if you like, of anything goes, this is for anyone, everyone is welcome, which is so important in times like now, albeit perhaps without quite the kind of grimy, sweaty dance floors that a lot of people would sort of love. They feel like slightly different things, albeit born out ultimately of brilliant music.
Final thing, James, what advice would you give to marketeers who are tuning in now, lots of the audience right now, people representing brands? What part should music play in their wider marketing strategy? Is it purely to make an emotional connection, for example, or do you think it can be broader than that?
No,
I mean,
I definitely.
I was just going to say, you've got the Heineken partnership coming up this weekend.
Yeah, I definitely think you can create that emotional connection. Honestly, I think it's about trying to be, it's about being audacious, actually. You know, we happen to do something that probably caught that first move or advantage moment more than anything and sustained itself through lovely positive noise. But you just have to have the audacity to kind of go, well, we could probably do this. And I would love to think people are doing that right now. Like, don't act weirdly, probably don't overthink it. So much good stuff came out of a spontaneous reaction to a moment. You know, creativity out of adversity is a very common thing. It's come out of music for years. You know, entire movements like punk came out of the 70s, or rave culture came out of the, you know, Thatcher 80s. Like, creativity out of adversity is an unbelievably powerful force. If you can leverage that and act on it quickly, then you're going to be in great shape.
Final thing, a bit of future gazing, if that's all right, James. Having said I'm too old for clubbing, I'm keen to know your thoughts on what's next. Are we going back to sweaty clubs but socially distant? Are we going back to bigger clubs? How are dance music going to creep back into life, if you like? What do you think is going to happen?
I would love to think. We will go back as we were. It might take a little bit of time, bit by bit. I think the socially distanced clubbing is a tricky one. It is perhaps filling another void. There are some lovely socially distanced sort of festival outdoory things, but it's a different thing. It's, you know, it's kind of picnic blanket and beautiful and listen to some music. It's a very different vibe.
Yeah.
Everyone is itching to get back to what it was before. I think we need to hope that we will and we can. And, you know, we're sort of nearing the end, sadly, of this summer in 2020. You'd hope by this time next year there's a return to something like a normality.
Brilliant. James, funnily enough, I'm not going to pass on any audience questions, simply because most of them have been gushing thanks. So thanks for making my Friday night parties kick off with a bang, says one, and another says thanks so much for being a really good thing during lockdown to keep everybody happy. So there you go. A key worker status achieved. So thanks so much. James, I really appreciate you joining us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
No worries. Cheers, James. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Bye now. So that's James Kirkham from Defected. Interesting snapshot there of a brand, if you like, and an organisation responding to lockdown around it, and how behaviours are changing, and how a brand, the key theme I took that from James was about being audacious and actually responding and having the belief